Eric, you are very active in the for the Palestinian rights. And can you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Peeters. I'm originally from Philadelphia, now living in Chicago. And as you said, I'm quite active in Palestine solidarity work.
Okay, Eric. What was your family? Did you go to church with your mom and dad? Your family? Can you introduce us to your family more? How was your family life in Philadelphia?
Sure.
Was it in the suburbs or in the city?
I actually came up from lower middle class family.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in a poor neighborhood of Philadelphia. My father was a fireman. My mother had a job working in an office building. And I was an only child, so they did what they could to support me. I was a typical kid, grew up playing baseball, football, I went to church with my aunts and uncles and my grandparents. I was like any other kid walking down the streets of America.
Now you go to college, isn't it Chicago, DePaul? Do you go to college?
Yeah, I go to UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago.
Which subject are you studying?
Anthropology.
Wow, it's great. So it's your subject too. The ethnic communities, especially the endangered ethnic communities, are very important.
Right.
I mean, in the United States, whole large list of ethnic communities disappeared, destroyed.
Sure.
And similar things are happening in Turkey too, and which is really sad. Unless somebody protects them, they will be in a really bad situation. Eric, I was going to ask you. You went to Gaza and Jenin, isn't it? Am I mistaken?
Right, I did.
What's your experience around there? What did you see? How did you find the Palestinian community? Their problems?
All right, so that's a pretty broad question. I spent 2 months there this past August and September, so about a year ago now. And I went with a delegation of people from Chicago and New York City as part of the Palestine Solidarity Group's annual delegation that we sent. My very first introduction to the occupation began as soon as I stepped off the plane. I was interrogated for a couple hours in the airport. Such questions: where are you going? Why are you here? Things like, how much money do you have with you? How come you don't have enough clothes? All these things, and then they would pass.
Because you were not typical rich tourists,
yeah.
Or going Christian fundamentals, going to churches,
right,
or Hilton
right.
or Sheraton hotels. So
right.
You were suspicious immediately because you don't look traditional tourist style.
Right. So that began, and then when I left the airport in a taxi, and I was on my way to Haifa to meet up with some people. We got stopped at a checkpoint, the taxi did, and one of the soldiers happened to like the boots I was wearing, and so they took them.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I mean,
So this was my first
it's like a
introduction.
vigilante bomb army, unbelievable.
Yeah.
There is the so-called super traditional, super disciplined Israeli defense forces. I'm amazing. This is the first time I'm hearing this. Wow.
But I mean, that kind of set the tone for the next 8 weeks.
So, I mean, if this happens to an American student, this can happen to the Palestinian villages all the time, it seems.
Sure.
Wow.
I mean, the Israelis, the army no longer seems to have any respect for anyone whatsoever.
Wow.
They never had it for the Palestinians, of course. But now, internationals are dying and going to jail. Even people that work for the UN, United Nations, are being killed, going to jail. My friend who used to work for the UN in Jenin is in jail now. No charges, no court case.
Wow.
They just, said, a security matter, and they threw him in jail.
I was watching John Pilger movie, and he shows the Palestinian headquarters, which is helping some kind of the medical and other like a administration building. The computer's broken down, somebody left a shit on it, and the money is stolen. I mean, the Western world never knows these subjects, never experiences or understands or listens or knows these subjects. Amazing. What about your experience with the? I heard about one of the films you introduced. Helicopters are sending rockets to the Arabs living in Israel. Their water depots are being machine gunned by helicopters.
Yeah.
And did you experience similar things?
Yeah, I saw a bunch of this firsthand when I was there. You know, time after time, day after day, I would go from one village to the next and find more demolished homes. You know, I'd find the wall being constructed. You know, I would find farmers that had lost their land. I would find family members whose son or daughter had been killed by the Israelis. And yeah, oftentimes I found people who didn't have enough water to even take a shower.
Wow.
You know, they have big families, and so you've got a family of 10 people. Some nights, only 1 or 2 people can take a shower because they don't have enough water. You know, they're totally dependent upon the Israelis to supply them with water, which is really tragic because they take the water out of Palestinian lands and then sell it back to them.
The reservoirs were in the Palestinian land, but I believe I read in one of the Guardian newspaper, I guess one of the or English newspapers, they were saying they cannot open a well, they cannot build a well, even in their own backyard. Is that true?
Yeah, everything that they want to do, whether it's build a well, build an extra room on their house because they had another baby, go to work, go to school, go visit family, all this is dictated and controlled by the Israelis when they say it's okay and if they say it's okay. You know, every aspect, you know, I mean, imagine every aspect of your life is totally controlled by someone else.
And the checkpoints, sometimes they cannot go to funeral, their relatives' funeral
Weddings.
or weddings. The basic
School.
social life is totally broken down. What's the point of this? Are they intimidating Palestinians so they can leave the land, hold the land to them, and so they can get the land? What's the basic? Is this the land grab? What is this designed? This intimidation? What's this designed for?
I mean, that's what it's always been. You know, ever since the founding of the State of Israel, it's been to expropriate more Palestinian land and push the Palestinians further and further out. You know, the same thing. You know, that's what the wall is for. You know, confiscating Palestinian lands. That's why there's so much daily and systematic torture and humiliation and just oppression of the Palestinians. Because something that I don't think a lot of people think about is in 1948 and then again in 1967, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were expelled and many were killed as well. They can't do that today. You know, if Israel was to do something,
Because of the United Nations, or the world is more sensitive, or the media is more sensitive, hopefully.
I think a combination of those.
Yeah.
You know, I think you have a situation where if they were to do a mass expulsion or something like that, you would have outcry all over the world. As we saw recently when they did invade Rafah and demolish hundreds of homes and killed a bunch of people, there was outcry all over the world. And the UN, you know, put forward a resolution condemning the actions in Rafah. For the first time, the United States didn't veto it. They abstained from the vote.
I remember,
And that's significant because the U.S. always
First
vetoes
time,
anything when it comes to Israel. You know, so instead of sending hundreds of thousands running for their lives, they send 2 here, 5 there, 1 here. You know, so it's a slow, daily, gradual expulsion. You know,
Once you
so many Palestinians I spoke to want to come to America. You know, because they can't have a life in Palestine.
True, it's very difficult. Once you told me about the for example, the Chicago senators and the representatives are quite liberal, progressive, or Democrat, but they are not very sensitive to Palestinian issues. Why they are, especially Durbin? What do you think? Why they are not so negligent about the Palestinian rights?
I think that has a lot to do with the fact that, I mean, the Democratic Party has a long history, you know, of allegiance and, well, not allegiance, support for the state of Israel. And of course, we all know that Israel is a strategic ally in the Middle East. that's sort of how the U.S. is able to maneuver the way they do throughout the Middle East. They've got this strong ally in the region. Pause for a second.
Yeah.
Right. So, basically, you can edit this, right? So, reasons why you see so many congressmen and senators and other politicians that are very progressive and good on issues like the war in Iraq, civil liberties, racism, money for schools. But when it comes to Israel and Palestine, they have a total one-sided approach to it and vote almost exclusively to side with Israel. Even when Israel's out there committing, atrocious human rights violations, when the UN and the rest of so continuing, basically, you have senators, congressmen, and other politicians that are very progressive and do the right thing oftentimes when it comes to issues like Iraq or racism or money for schools and so forth. But when it comes to something like Israel and Palestine, they almost exclusively vote to side with Israel. Even when Israel's actions are in direct contradiction to international law, human rights conventions, and so forth, they continue to support them. And the main reason for that, there's several. One is that they're a strategic ally in the region, and it's important for U.S. interests, U.S. imperialism, expansion, that they have a strong ally in the region, and that ally is Israel. The other reason is that there's groups like AIPAC, the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee, as well as a number of other groups, even like the Jewish United Fund and, Friends of the IDF and State of Israel bonds. You have all of these, in some cases political, in some cases supposedly humanitarian institutions that are sending money to Israel. There are also an institution like AIPAC, for instance, gives hundreds of thousands of dollars to U.S. politicians every year so that they vote how AIPAC wants them to vote. And if they don't vote the way AIPAC wants them to vote, oftentimes they run smear campaigns against them and get them basically run out of office. We saw this with Cynthia McKinney. Excuse me.
I was going to ask
you. They have a very powerful lobby in this country.
True.
They have a lot of money.
True.
And basically everyone is scared. Not me. But
even the progressive Jewish intellectuals like Amy Goodman and the Professor Finkelstein, the others, they are oppressing them as self-hating Jews. They created some kind of term. Anybody criticizes Israel is self-hating Jew. They are putting down. They are really anti-Semitic. They are abusing even the Holocaust, because Finkelstein's mother was Holocaust survivor, and he wrote a wonderful book about the Holocaust Inc. I was going to ask you some of the things I am having difficulty understand. The United States is based on law. Now we have limitations, but Israel is based on, and they are, to a certain extent, they respect their own religious principles. Israel signed the Geneva Convention. Israel signed the many international conventions, and part of United Nations. It is against to confiscate land in the occupied territories, or hinder the people's lives, take their land, or break down the buildings. This is totally against the United Nations principles, and some of the principles are signed by Israel. And also, the law of Judaism, theology, says you cannot punish son because of father's guilt or something like that. Judaism is against the collective punishment. So how they can rationalize this, and how the people of the United States can tolerate this, even how the people of Israel can tolerate this. Are they resisting groups in the United States and in Israel? I heard about the refuseniks in the military. They are saying this is inhuman treatment. We are not going to be part of it. What do you think about those cases?
Again, you asked a question that went in a couple different directions there.
It's a long question. Question and comment, maybe,
I think it's very good that you see, Jewish peace groups and organizations and so forth in the United States and also in Israel that have been speaking out against the occupation and have been working to try to change things. Some are, of course, better than others. some,
like not in my name. And there's in California there's a Jews for Justice. There are a few groups I heard of, but I don't know. I know not in my name, but the others I don't know too much. And frankly,
well, there's like Jews Against the Occupation. There's Jews Against Zionism. There's Notori Karta. You know, and I tend to like those organizations better than some others.
Yeah.
I think that they're in it for more humanitarian reasons and, you know, looking towards the future. I do think there's some, you know, and you see it in the American peace movement too. I think there's some that just want things to be a little more little nicer, but not really change that much. You know, so you know, I mean, it's clear we need a radical transformation of not just the society but our world. You know,
true.
You can't just put a Band-Aid on it and expect it to heal. You know.
My feeling is every day we are losing the rule of law, democratic rights, and the wars. The forces promoting war is getting stronger and more influential in media and other sources which influence the people. It's really bad. I was going to ask you, what is the future of the Palestine? I mean, once I heard about Ali Abu Numa, he's saying maybe we will build one Palestine, and by our votes we will defend our rights just by one person, one vote. It seems pessimistic to me. My feeling is the Israeli Likud will never permit this. But what will be the end of the struggle? And there's a suicide bombings, which hurts the civilian people too. I believe it can be said as a terrorism, and it should stop too. Both sides should seek for the peace, and if the civilians are hurt, there must be a solution to stop this kind of attacks. But I heard another thing about the settlers are using Uzi guns and attacking the villages and the olive gardens, so they are transferring their position to the civilians, to the occupier, the semi-military occupiers, which is wrong too. But there are many innocent Israelis dies, because one of the I heard in the internet, one of the girl's father was so angry to Israeli government. He said, "You abused these Palestinians so many years, neglected their rights, and they are revolting against us." And he built a Palestinian fathers and Israeli fathers against occupation. He built some kind of a station. I forgot the exact names and the commands, but that is nice. But the suffering is ultimately suffering people are the civilians, and most of the civilians are on the Palestinian side. So what will be the future? What will be this fight? What is the struggle for? Is there a solution? Is there a light end of the tunnel?
You know, I mean, that's a pretty complex question. You know, it's also a simple question. I mean, it's as simple as, you know, once the Israelis end the military occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, then they can actually start to work towards, you know, a dialogue. And then it's for them to work out, not for me, not for the United States government, you know, not for anyone else to decide what the fate of the Israelis and the Palestinians will be. It's up to them. But, you know, that can never even come close to happening until the occupation ends. You know what I mean? There's other things that need to happen too. For instance, Palestinians living inside of Israel that are technically citizens of Israel are treated like third-class citizens, are discriminated against. You know,
I saw from your films,
much like African Americans here in the
United States. Like Bantustan, they don't have a sewage, they don't have a drinking water, they don't have even some kind of administrative rights to be a part of the government. They are really like apartheid. Definitely, I saw in your films. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
But you know, so I mean that obviously has to happen. The occupation has to end. We also feel like, you know, Israel has to respect the various UN resolutions that they've signed and been a party to. Such as, you know, resolution granting the right of return for Palestinian refugees. When Israel became a state, they signed that resolution.
They signed that? I didn't know. They signed.
They
really
never
signed
allowed
it. Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
they signed it.
They signed it and never held it up.
Wow, I didn't know that.
You know, so one, they have to respect Palestinian human rights, you know, not just in the occupied territories, but inside of Israel itself. You know, occupation has to end. Refugees should be allowed to come back. You know, compensation has to be made for various things. Obviously, the wall's got to come down.
Yeah.
But you know, the first step, I think, in all that is ending the
Yeah.
occupation.
People should build bridges, especially as a future anthropologist. You know, when the people builds wall, it seems animosity, it seems war. But when the people build bridges, especially cultural bridges, that would be nice. I heard the Barenboim, the Chicago symphony conductor, against all warnings, he went to Palestinian village and he conducted a musical night. And that is to me building bridges.
Sure.
You know, forgetting leaving the justice, prejudice, injustice behind, and handing your hand. Let's make a peace. Let's find a solution.
Sure.
Thank you for your time, Eric. I really appreciate it, and I think the people of the other countries will like to see a person, a future anthropologist in Chicago, in the middle of Chicago, fighting for the Palestinian rights. So that is very important, I believe, and I hope we will carry the message to other people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So, you know, a lot of people talk about Palestinian terrorism, suicide bombings. You know, and personally, I choose not really to get into, you know, whether or not that's justified or should we condemn it and so forth. Because to me, that is simply a product of the occupation. If there was no occupation, there wouldn't be suicide bombings, you know? And because I'm not the one that has to live under occupation, and since my parents didn't live under the occupation and my grandparents, you know, since I don't have that first-hand perspective, you know, it's not for me to tell the Palestinians how they should or shouldn't fight back, you know? It is tragic and unfortunate that, you know, some, you know, truly innocent civilians, you know, are, you know, fall victim to that. Although we have to clear that too. You gotta remember, a lot of Israelis that have been killed, I mean, let's put it this way, right? Of course, you know, any violence and warfare is tragic and unfortunate. And of course, that's not the way that we want our world and our societies to be. But the current state of affairs, you know, dictates that if someone's oppressing you and occupying you and exterminating you left and right, you have to fight back and defend yourself. You know, the Israelis are the ones with the tanks and the helicopters and the machine guns and the nuclear weapons and biological weapons, you know, all the sophisticated weaponry. And, you know, they're the ones with the billions of dollars in U.S. aid each year. The Palestinians have literally some rocks, some small arms, you know, some rifles, and some homemade bombs, and that's all they have to fight back with. You know, international law says that, you know, people under occupation have a right to resist that occupation by any means necessary. You know, so a lot of people, when they talk about, you know, well, the Palestinians are coming into Israel, well, where else are they going to be able to fight back? You know, the only it's a tough question. I mean, there's so many different facets to it, you know, and there's so many different concerns you have to take into account. You know, I guess I'll just sum it up by saying, you know, it's unfortunate there has to be any violence. But I do support the right of Palestinians to defend themselves. You know, and when you look at the resistance in Palestine, it's largely non-violent. You know, the actual components that are, you know, armed and doing suicide bombings, those are just a small component of the overall resistance. You know, there's plenty of, you know, civil disobedience. There's marches. There's, you know, strikes. You know, students have, you know, done sit-downs. You know, I mean. The fact that Palestinians have to live their lives under the control of the Israelis each and every day, 24 hours a day, and the fact that they just do go on and not leave the country, commit suicide, or whatever else, that's a form of resistance in itself. They're resisting and saying, I'm going to live my life.
We
I'm
are
not
surviving.
going to leave my land. I'm going to stay here.
Like Native Americans, we survive. Our customs, our music, even against all oppressions, all powerful armies, we survive. Surviving is the biggest resistance, but they should thrive too. After 50 years of occupation, they have right to education, they have right to be happy families, they have the right to have safe homes, like all people all around the world, isn't it? Every night they shouldn't be thinking a tank or bulldozer is coming to come down and break our houses to our heads, really.
It's sort of like, you can't really talk about the violence on the part of the Palestinians, the violence on the part of the Israelis, as if they're equal.
Sure.
One side has all the arms, all the money, has the upper hand, and is the occupier. One is the oppressed, the occupied, the one without, and it's just to survive. So, you have to kind of put it in that context too. For every, again, this isn't justifying, I'm just saying, but for every Jew that dies in Israel or Palestine, 3 Palestinians, well actually 3.5 Palestinians.
And mostly children, young, the future of Palestine. These are 16, 14, 18-year-olds. They are the future of the country. It's really sad.
I mean, you really got to put yourself, try to put yourself, anyway, it's difficult, but try to put yourself in their position too.
Yeah.
The 13-year-old kid who saw his mother, harassed at a checkpoint yesterday, and his father put in prison last year, and his friend killed, and has himself been beaten at checkpoints by soldiers. I mean, this kid's got every motivation to go ahead and take up arms against the Israelis. I mean, and you have to understand that. It's not like Palestinians are violent by nature, or that the Arabs hate the Jews and all that. I mean, that's nonsense. There are very real reasons that there's a conflict, and it's the occupation and everything that comes with it. If you want the violence to end, the Israelis have to withdraw. You can't. Every time that Israel, or the United States for that matter, talks about it, or passes a resolution, or comes up with a new peace plan, Oslo, Camp David, Geneva, just on and on. They always say the Palestinians have to stop the violence. The Palestinians
one-sided, very one-sided,
And maybe they say, and Israel should stop expanding settlements. But they never get into the torture, the detentions, the denial of access to food and water.
Checkpoints, education, health services.
It's really unfortunate, And when you're there, it's hard not to be angry. Angry that it's happening to someone. Angry that you can't do more about it. But then when you leave, then it becomes no longer anger, and it's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for me. The people I came to know while I was there, I know are now in jail or dead. Including while I was there. The kid that I shared a taxi with was killed an hour later.
You still have friends there? I mean, you communicate with them, you talk to them on the phone, email them? And their moms and dads in their family?
That's it too, I mean, and when I was there, I met with Jews too.
Yeah, true.
And overwhelmingly, everyone I spoke to said, we could live in peace, we want to live in peace together. No one said, they stay there, we stay here. They said that we could live together. So
the government policy, the extreme right-wing Likud and other people, they don't want peace. It's the politicians, they stir the environment and politics.
The settlers too.
Yeah, settlers too.
The settlers are pretty extreme.
Fanatics. If the policy is organized, manipulated by zealots or fanatics, there's no hope. I think in United States, in Israel, in all around the world, zealots should be. We have to change places. People with the common sense, with the real humanism, real understanding, should replace the zealots. But strangely enough, nowadays it seems the zealots are gaining more power in media, in organization, in monetary terms. It is really in the future it's going to change, but it is depressing sometimes. We are passing through really difficult times on that subject.
You know, it's also going to take the international community,
True.
and especially us here in the United States, to start to do a lot more. To start to speak out about what's happening.
Definitely. Yeah.
You know, people
Absolutely.
need to write to their congressman, fax the president. People need to come out and do demonstrations.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the
People
parts.
need to visit Palestine and see for themselves what's happening, and then come back and tell other people like I try to do.
Also, Eric, I saw one of your films, your film festival, Palestinian Film Festival. One of the films I saw, I saw Italian groups, English groups. It seems it's becoming really international resistance. Can you speak about those groups too? The Italians, the English, and the Germans.
Yeah, I mean, at any time, there's lots of internationals in the West Bank and Gaza. You know, some are there doing, you know, humanitarian work, you know, maybe through a church or through an educational institution. The kind of work that we're doing there is like we send medical delegations there. We send people to work in hospitals and clinics, and we also send people to meet with various organizations and establish relationships. You know, so we'll go and we'll meet with women's organizations. We'll go and meet with students, doctors, you know, politicians, people throughout all Palestinian life, and then come back here and find ways that we can support them. You know, and there's groups there. I mean, there's all kinds of groups there doing all kinds of work.
But this, I mean, for example, today this wall. I have been in Chicago nearly 18 years. Last 3 years, I mean, people like you, we have to thank you, bringing the issues to the upfront, and we began to see the other side of the reality. Till last 5 years, nobody thought about it. Even the mass media was negligent about the condition of the Palestinians, as if the problems or difficulties only Jewish people has in Israel. Do you know? Now we began to see the people, the natives of Palestine, and they have major problems. And thanks for bringing those issues to us. Thank you again, Rick. I really appreciate it.
That's kind of part of what we try to do.
Thank you.